Guess I'm just gonna begin. Shall we go ahead and kick this off? Um, Hello, everyone. I'm Heather McIntosh. I'm the co-president of the Alliance for Women Film Composers, and I am thrilled to moderate this very special Emmy contender panel for this jumping off point community meeting. We are featuring Sherri Chung, who scored Based on a True Story, Jamie Jackson from Bad Monkey, Raphaelle Thibaut from Sea Lions of the Galapagos, Anna Waronker from Yellowjackets, and Jessica Rose Weiss from American Horror Stories, The Thing Under the Bed. We are so pleased to have everyone. You can check in our comments on the side. We've got everyone links to everyone's sites so you can snoop around and check out their work. And I guess we're just so thankful to have you all here. I've watched all of these shows and I'm a huge fan of everyone. And I'm just excited to get into this a little bit with y'all today. So thank you so much for joining.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Awesome. I guess the thing that I noticed when I was going through this, like every single one of our composers here have come in from a different entry point on the project. Jamie, you're on first season. Sherri, you're on second season. Anna, you're on third season. Jessica, you're on anthology. And Raphaelle, you did a doc, a sort of epic doc. So why don't we just start from the beginning with Jamie? What was it like? What was your entry point like? We'll sort of discuss entry point for each of these projects at all these different stages. What was that like for you?
Well, the entry point was very interesting. It took us, the project, we did 10 episodes. It took about 2.5 years. And it started at the tail end of the pandemic. So there was a lot of, COVID protocol, set shutting down. And then there was it was shot in Florida. So there was a lot of weather delays and wildlife. And then the writer's strike happened. So it was hurry up and wait. We started getting picture early cuts that didn't really have the producer's hands on, that the producers hadn't started editing at all. And, it was a long process where we started creating music and it was about 6 to 7 months before we would hear back. So the challenge was really not getting in our heads. We were lucky to have the first script, but also the show is based on a Carl Hiaasen novel. So we were able to really dive into those characters and that character development with the novel. So that's how we, jumped in.
Awesome. Did you kind of set up, like, did you have sort of like a playlist of all your character themes, or was it just sort of like you read the script and the book and you just started writing as much as you could to?
Yeah, well, first we kind of started with the origin of sounds because it takes place in Florida, in the Keys and Miami, but also in Andros, Bahamas. So it was really fun seeing how the root of the sounds from those locations, they share the same root, and Carl Hiaasen is really like, he's an environmentalist. And so we really wanted to ground the score before we dove into all the crazy tones, the absurdity, the drama, the comedy, because that was a real struggle because the tones would shift so frequently. You're in an absurd dark scene and Vince Vaughn, who plays Yancey, cracks a joke. And so you're kind of teetering between all these emotions. So we started there, and then, I fell in love with the characters. Carl really has these incredibly rich characters, and I personally fell in love with like the Dragon Queen and Eve and some of the female characters. I really resonated with that. So I started writing themes for them early on.
It's great. Sherri, it's fun to have Jamie talk about her project and then hear yours because you both have these mysteries and there's the dark against light. So Sherri, what was that like your entry point for this second season?
Yes, okay. So based on a true story started with one with the creator Craig Rosenberg and showrunner. And I've actually never had this. Maybe you guys have experienced this before, but I've never had a situation where it changes showrunners and like so drastically. Like it's not just like, oh, we're going to hand it off to somebody else. It was kind of like, no, Craig is going to take it. He's going to be producer, and there's going to be a completely different person who, so I was really grateful to be even brought back on the project because, as we know, that's sometimes that doesn't happen. So working with Annie Weissman was really cool, and one of the biggest questions, I think, the natural questions that we ask a new to us showrunner is like, how are we continuing on? Obviously we have our characters, Ava and Nathan, played by Kaylee Cuoco and Chris Messina, and they're just, they're really great, and they're, so how are we gonna progress this, and or how are we going to like what's different, like what's your new vision, and is any of my old vision, actually gonna get to stick around. And Annie was really open to all the character development that we had gone through. I think one of the biggest changes was Kaylee Cuoco was pregnant during the filming of the first season, and so they worked that into her character. And obviously they have a baby now, and so they kind of worked that into everything as well. And it's interesting, I think, when you work on a subsequent season, it's you want to obviously do something different and develop it. And I think that one of the easiest ways to dive into that is just to really kind of see like what is the journey and the arc of those characters. So obviously there's a baby, like I said, but each one of them, the characters are taking their own spin on things. And one character is dealing with his washed upness as like a really like a tennis player that never really really made it. And then one character is she's going off on her own and trying to do a detective and whodunit kind of situation. So anyway, so you have one who's just like, oh, I'm coming into my own as a crime solving, guru, and then one's like dealing with his own issues of masculinity. So I think there's a lot of exploration in the sounds, and of course, the sounds that I tried to put in there were, it's kind of the kitchen sink. It's not often, I think, where you get a project where they're like yes to anything weird and wacky and zany and indulgent. And so it's just fun as composers to be able to dive into something where any sound is okay, from typewriters, which I used a lot on the first season, and then to male grunts, because what addresses male masculinity than a grunt? Again, we talked about this other, but like I go for the low hanging fruit. I go for the easy stuff because
the beautiful hanging fruit. It's perfect. It works.
It works. Okay. It works. I know. So sometimes we have to reinvent wheels, as we know, and other times it's like, no, it's there, it's done. We're gonna do that. But it was a lot of fun to explore the new sounds and push boundaries, and luckily, Annie was really open to all of it.
Amazing. That's great. So Anna, third
Okay.
season of Yellowjackets for you.
Yes.
It's such an intense world that you're living in with these folks.
Tell me about it. I mean, it's an extreme experience, I have to say. And, it's a very, very layered story and production, and so is the music. And we use so many elements from the previous seasons in whatever we're currently working on. And I'm afraid to start season 4 because I can't even imagine how many tracks we'll be using per session. But it's a real experience. I mean, there's so many different sides to it, but in terms of like, how do we enter into the process? We've done it differently each time. And with a show like this, where you're constantly referencing all of these different sounds as story points and like bringing up a memory feeling, like they're all very subtle, obviously, because no one's like studying the score while they're watching a TV show. But if someone really cares, they've asked questions about certain things where like, do you put the same scream every time you show that symbol? And I'm like, we do actually. Um, it's a real ride. I mean, it takes me quite some, I fall like you guys, I fall in love with these characters. I care so deeply about the work that we do, but also the show and these experiences. And it's it's a trip. It's an absolute trip. But I do think it takes a lot of spontaneity, like you were saying about the kitchen sink and everything, there's no wrong anything. And luckily we get to do that as well in Yellowjackets. And it's just finding what works and then being very organized about all of the referential material. So it allows space to be spontaneous.
I love that. That's great. So now we're sort of moving on to our anthology idea. So, Jessica, we'd love to chat with you about diving into an anthology series like This World of American Horror Stories. You scored the final episode of is it the third season, I believe?
Yeah.
And
yeah.
The Thing Under the Bed. And what was that like to you to jump into a world that's been existing? I know that they're anthology, but still.
Yeah, the beauty of it is, the showrunner, Alexis Martin Woodall, who's amazing, she kind of similarly to what Sherri just said, she just said, like, go for it. Go bonkers. Do anything you want to do. Just don't be passive about it. Don't be scared to, really dive in and do some weird shit. So she let me explore and experiment for a little while, but this was really my first time in the television space. So just the process was so different from film world, because I'm much more in the film community in that respect, in terms of the kind of projects that I work on. But yeah, I mean, it was kind of bananas, because it was such a quick turnaround. The showrunner was working on multiple other episodes for this season. So I kind of scored the whole thing down. I was working with the editor, who, as we all know, can either be your best friend or your worst enemy. And luckily in this case was my best friend. And so he was super helpful, and the producer was incredibly helpful as well. But we kind of I went all in, and the director, when she was on set, was sending me, because it's the old thing under the bed narrative, where we all know what that means, if your worst nightmare as a kid. The director was sending me all of these voice recordings of the actor that was playing the Thing going like, oh, and she would send it through to me, and I started building these instruments out of it. So it was kind of a smorgasbord of a sound palette, because I was using that. A friend of mine brought in a violin. I do not play violin. And he was like, you play it, I'll record you. So a lot of that was used, because it was horror at its finest. It was horrible to listen to. So it worked really, really well for the score. And then for me, the kind of the cherry on top of it was, I genuinely got hired because the showrunner said, we really need themes. And I was like, well, I'm a melodist. Like, I understand that there's so many versions of scoring something. I can give you a motif if you want it. I was like, but I want to write a real melody and a real theme. And so I was so fortunate to have that luxury. So the whole process was really exciting, because I got to be experimental. I got to really dig into the thematic writing that I love to do. And it was all in the horror genre space, which I'm now madly in love with. And I'm just like, sign me up, like Blumhouse, call me anytime. I really, really love it, because you get to straddle both of those worlds. The sonic palette can be so interesting, and then you have to have really thematic material to make the world sing. So it was just such an awesome experience from start to finish.
That's great. Awesome.
Yeah.
I love it. Raphaelle, I'd love to chat with you about your film. I just watched it last night, and great. Anyways, we're going to talk about big details and everything, but how did you enter into this world of the sea lions and Leo?
Oh, Leo. But when I was hired for that job, it was, I think, 2 years ago, and I was so excited, because it's a franchise, right? There were many other Disney nature films like this one before, and they were kind of all scored by these, huge names. And so I kind of like walked in, and I was, a little bit of, there was a little bit of pressure. And I immediately um, understood that it was a lot about, like, I really approached it almost like a scripted film. In documentaries, I did a lot of documentaries, and I often let the music hold back and, support rather than lead and that kind of things. And with Sea Lions, it was really built around a real narrative arc with clear emotional beats, like a real character growth of Leo. You said it, you follow a sea lion from the newborn phase to when it becomes a beachmaster years after. So I really scored it and approached it as like a fiction movie. And I knew from the get-go that the range would be insane. Like that I would go from a very intimate, sad, nostalgic little piece to this epic, big orchestral, uh, you know, theme-based pieces. I also knew that it would be recorded with, a like 70-piece orchestra. So I knew it would be big. So I really approached it as like an epic fiction film, really. So and that for me as a composer was extremely exciting because what documentaries bring to the table usually is this huge range of genres. Um, and in that case, not only there was this big range, but also it was very close to an animation movie and a fictional one, and that was super exciting. Yeah,
Yeah.
from the get-go.
This is flowing right into the next question I was going to ask you, which is like the epic quality of this world that you've built. I saw in your credits that you worked in trailer music in the past. Like you get to really sort of like do all of these sort of like muscular moves, but it's the way that the theme sort of built through these beautiful, sweet little waltzes and how they grow. And I was so invested. It's really incredible, and it is insane how much music you have in that
Yeah.
in the world. Were you starting all from scratch? I know you said it was from a Disney franchise. Like this is all your themes. You were able to just go for it, I imagine. It seems like, or did you have to chase anything from previous? This is all you, right?
No, no, no. This is all me. Yeah, and
Yeah,
and 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 you always kind of approach, especially with a Disney nature franchise. There is definitely a Disney signature sound, especially when it comes to documentaries, right? And there are a lot of filmmakers in the documentary world that are going to tell you, I really don't want anything like traditional orchestral, I want something new, more experimental. Well, that's the opposite. Like you have to go full on Disney orchestra, which is really great. I have a classical background and it was a blast for me to do it. So yeah, no, it was definitely it was definitely super exciting and definitely you said it, the trailer world. Damn, it's a tough world. I worked in the trailer for years and that it's the best school because you have to learn how to build music like it would be if it was recorded, you would need two stadiums. It's massive and it has to be perfect. The mix has to be perfect. The instrumentation has to be perfect. Nothing can go wrong because it's so epic, big, and then it goes in the theaters, right? The sound has to be amazing. And there's so much expectations in that world. And I started working on trailers quite early on in my career because I started quite late in my life as a composer, and it was kind of at the beginning, and it was really tough. It's a tough one. You get rejected a lot. You don't get paid most of the time, but it was the best school to be able to work on these big epic pieces for sure.
yeah, it was so dialed in. It's really just gorgeous work. And I was so invested. I'm always a little nervous to watch Disney anything because I'm just like, I'm gonna just weep. There's no end. I know what's happening, and I'm still weeping through it, but it's just the most beautiful. It's really incredible work, and it was wonderful
Yeah.
just to hear you flex in all these different ways. It's gorgeous.
Thank
It's
you.
wonderful. Anna, speaking of epic, your song that you have, "Sleepwalking," right?
Yes.
It it also sort of follows that sort of like it's the opening piece of music from the finale, right? So
Yes.
we're not starting off with the theme song that we love. We're in this, like, it almost has like an intimacy to it, this dreamlike sort of entry, and it just is perfect as we're dialing through everybody's character arc and where everyone is now and how far we've come. And
Yeah.
I'm wondering what the process was for you to find like such a beautiful, like long, it has such a beautiful long arc, but it really dials into every single person. I was just like, God, the tension, it's exactly what we needed. That little like hold our breath, sit with these
Thank
people and see
you.
where it all shakes out. So what was that like? How did you find this song? How did you know right out of the gate this is what this was going to look like as you're wrapping up the final episode?
No, no, not at all. We also didn't know that the last episode would have 45 minutes of score. But um no, initially the showrunners had a song that would cover the story arc for the first half of the finale, that would keep reappearing. So every time you would hear this song, you would know you were back in that kind of dream state. And they couldn't get the song. And so their next thought was, well, then Anna and Craig, who I work with on the show, Craig Wedren, um, well, Anna and Craig are going to top it then. So fine. And so we were thrilled, also so scared because we had so much work to do. But, we wanted to do something very different from the score, but still in the world. So we wanted it to be very spare, and we wanted it to be an extension of the band that we've created from the theme song. And what would that song be from that band that we pretend we're in? And it just it did kind of flow out. We had written three different songs for that because we wanted to make sure they had enough range to choose from because it's a really important episode. And one of the creators directed it, and we just really wanted to do right by them. But we knew that was the one because as we were writing, we had the picture on in the background, that whole opening sequence. And we were just kind of writing, and writing a song can get very repetitive. And the moments that would happen just organically would somehow match up with the picture. And we would know, okay, that works. And so we just kind of went from there. I mean, we had that with each song, but it was Sleepwalking was really the one. And lyrically, I just, like you were saying, Heather, and I appreciate you kind of responding to this. I really wanted to touch on everyone's experience. There's so many feelings going on in this show, from, you know, young women to the adult women, and how those stories bounce off of each other, and things you didn't understand before now make sense because you just saw what happened. And so there's a lot of foreshadowing in the lyrics, but it's all very subtle, and we tried to keep it very, very simple. And then at the end, we just kind of wanted it to be like a wail, a cry, a bit of mourning, because it's really painful out there in the wilderness. And what they came back with is still haunting them, even when they're happy and even when they have good things. And then, of course, that's a metaphor for life. And so, we just got real guttural with that. And it was cool. And then we ended up having Bart Nickerson, who co-created the show. He's an EP and directed the episode, direct a video for us for the song, which is also was a really fun experience because he didn't even pick up on all of the subtleties. He and I always go back and forth about the subtleties of the plot and how the music can really pull on that. Like if one of the young characters is experiencing something that is more of a common occurrence in her adult life, we'll bring those sounds into her past life
Yeah.
to try to like trick the ear into thinking like that. And so with the video is just kind of fun and kooky, but we really played off of the subtleties and the different crossing over of themes, and how each character is kind of represented in the lyrics.
Wonderful. I also loved, hats off to the editorial team on that. I love how it cuts to the quick at the end of that cue. It's just like, it's beautiful. It's so well
Yes.
done.
Jeff Israel he's a master.
It's wonderful. Well, it's so cool to hear about how your songwriting, you got to really explore your songwriting gifts in these moments here. And do you feel, I asked this to you and also to Jess about, and I think Jamie, you're a songwriter as well. How does the songwriting affect your score writing? Like how, like, I know, like, do you feel like you kind of maybe answered it by saying that like you're seeing all the story and you're able to reflect on these different points, but is there any other aspects you find as a songwriter that shows up?
Well, scoring, I had to kind of break my songwriting muscle a little bit for scoring when I started to build my scoring muscles, because you're composing to picture, and it's not about what your instincts are about the structure of a song. It's about following what goes on the picture. And that was always like a real jolt for me at first, because I just wanted it, but it's supposed to go like this. It's supposed to happen 4 times, not 5.5. But I also love one of my secret loves is music editing, which I don't think I would pursue, but I love kind of temping with pre-existing score for the show. But so taking the song and then editing it into score, like the song goes in and out of being score and then and the song, that was really fun.
That's great. Jess,
Yeah.
how do you feel about that?
I agree.
Do you call yourself is it a melodist? Is that what that's so awesome. I love it. So tell us how does that translate for you when you're scoring?
No, I mean, I'm completely with Anna. Like I had to break that part of myself off for a long time as I was exploring, composition for film and TV. But the beautiful thing is it always comes back in times that I need it. If I'm not actually songwriting within the context of a score that I'm doing, once I've seen the picture, I'll oftentimes just be walking around going on a hike, and I'll pull out my voice memo and I'll start humming things. And so like, that's still my songwriter brain where like, that's the melodist part, right? I'm like, okay, I have no idea where that's going to live within the context of what I'm doing, but somewhere there's like a nugget of an idea that I might be able to use. And so, I've chatted with that, about that concept with Dan Romer so many times, because he has that background too. And we always kind of laugh with each other about that it's just like, it's a part of who you are as a writer. So you don't need to get rid of it essentially, but finding ways to implement it in when it's appropriate can be a really positive thing. So, yeah.
So cool. Cause I sometimes like coming from indie rock stuff, sometimes I shut down any of my songwriting brain and just like, oh, well, the cello part of my indie rock space, like I can bring that over here. But like, I sometimes will compartmentalize my creative space. And it's cool to hear you talk about using voice memos or just humming ideas and seeing how those land, because sometimes when you're just sitting at your rig and you're writing and you're staring at middle C and you start writing, you get stuck in the same
loop
and get lost in just the same thing. And the second you like jump to your voice, a more authentic lyrical space, or you pick up a different instrument, or however that looks, you really can find so much from that. I just love to hear how organically you connect those worlds. It's really great.
I mean, look, I scored an animated feature once, and I was really trying to get this theme through, and I knew it was right. And yes, like director, gets final everything, but the director liked it. The producer wasn't sure. So I convinced the producer that it was actually a song I was writing. And once she heard that, she was like, oh, she's like, wait, so can you just hum it as a song? And I did that. She's like, oh, no, now I get it. I was like, okay, great.
Good to know. Good tip.
Good tricks.
I mean, sometimes they just, you know, they want to feel like they're connected to both of those worlds, if that's a part of who you are as a writer. And especially when you're asked to replace songs that, you know, a studio can't afford, for example. It's just like, there's so many tricks, right, to what we do. So I use it to my advantage when I can.
Jamie, I feel like Songwriter Brain helps with your opening theme. It is such an awesome earworm. It is so fun. All the wow, it's just a blast. And it does really reflect on that time and space that you're talking about. Like it feels very beachy, you know, like it just lands. How does that translate for you, like in working on a main theme or scoring in general?
I think, you know, having experience as a songwriter really helps with the themes and the melodies. But then I do as much as I can to get uncomfortable and put and creatively so that I can allow that spontaneity to come in because as songwriting, you know, as Anna and Jessica were saying, like you're like, okay, and here comes the bridge or here comes the shift, and you just have to completely let go of that. So a lot of times, you know, like for the theme on Bad Monkey, I picked up an instrument that I don't play. You know, I picked up the guitar and I picked up like, you know, a Sharpie highlighter and just started like, you know, doing things that I didn't understand, you know, because it needed to be absurd and I felt absurd in that moment. And I also, you know, started the morning that the theme came, we had been getting early picture and Bill Lawrence, the showrunner and creator, had not come back from Florida yet. So really the tone, the search for tone was still weighing on everyone's minds. Like no one had it yet. And so we were having to kind of think forward. We weren't seeing where the series was going to be. We had to kind of rely on our instincts, rely on the novel. And it was kind of driving me a bit crazy because we saw so many cuts that weren't quite where the show was going before Bill got his hands on it. And so one morning, you know, there was like that a placeholder for the title card. And it was just this monkey like staring at me, taunting me. And I was like, oh my God, like, what is the tone of this show? We're going to need to write a main title. They're going to come back from Florida. It's going to be hurry up and wait. We need to have all this material ready to throw up against the picture without really collaborating so closely, you know, in advance. And so I was really sick one morning and I took some cold medicine and I came down and I opened my session and there was the monkey just like kind of taunting me. And I was like, damn it, you know what? I'm going to write a fucking theme right now. Like, grabbed my husband's guitar, grabbed a highlighter, started, you know, playing around, started panting and grunting like a monkey. And my husband walked in and was like, what the hell is that? That's the theme song, you know? And so in that moment, we kind of surrendered to the process of letting go of control and, you know, all the research that we had done on the origins of the sounds. So like I knew I'm really into Afrobeat anyway. I knew I wanted like some inspired Afrobeat bass line that was just hypnotic and had a groove. And then you know, the Dragon Queen and the female characters spoke to me so much. I knew that the focus was on Yancey and Vince Vaughn, but gosh, these actresses were really informing the series and the tone, and it was gorgeous. So I added some like female vocals to it. And then to raise the stakes, I ended up sending a text message to Bill. He was in Florida, like dealing with like a hurricane warning or something. And I was like, you just got to listen to this. Tell me what you think. And he liked it. And so at that moment, it really like broke the chains and let us just play and have fun.
That's great.
Yeah.
Sherri, it seems like it's interesting. We have these two back and forth of like the mystery, the humor, the world building, and I was just curious, like with that, we've talked a bit about this before about how you played to the humor of the space. I'd love to just hear a little bit more about how I feel like the contrast between the humor and the danger is always so great to look at. And also, you spoke a bunch about sound design and how that sound design sort of played into these spaces. And I was wondering if you wanted to sort of discuss a little bit more about that world building with the sound design, with these incredible sharp characters, the humor that you have from our leads. I feel like you're kind of the torchbearer from season 1 to season 2 on a lot of that, along with the actors, of course. But just to speak more about that would be wonderful.
Yeah, thank you. I think so. It based on true story is a comedic thriller, and I had never done a comedic thriller before. And I think ever since like maybe like Flight Attendant, I feel like, which I did not score, but you know it was a great score by Blake Neely, and it was like it was such kind of a weird genre, maybe bending or blending maybe type of show. And I feel like there were kind of, and that was also Kaylee Cuoco. So you're bringing Kaylee into this as well. And it was obviously it's a very, very different show. But I think for me, it was a lot of exploration of, well, what is, you know, what is another way to do comedy music? And I talked about low hanging fruit before, and it's a little bit self deprecating, but it's in some ways it's also really true, because sometimes you just kind of go for it. It doesn't have to be, you know, the best idea necessarily, but starting out with an idea that works. And I was really interested in exploring harmonically and also instrumentally, like what makes comedy, because I've done a lot, we've all probably done like a lot of either comedic scenes or rom-coms or just something, and there's always like, I feel like a couple of like tools that you're always supposed to use. And one of them, often if it's not guitar, is like pizzicato. But I really kind of wanted to explore, well, what is there a way to make pizzicato not just funny, like because I didn't want to make a comedic score. Like I didn't want to make something that was like, hey, this is just clearly funny. We joked about like tuba. You know, it's a tuba. It's funny. You know, it's pizzicato. It's plucking strings. You're gonna laugh. But I wanted to kind of figure out, is there a other way to do that? And I think, I don't know if I landed on it, but I don't know what I landed on, but whatever it was, it ended up being a thing that kind of blurs tonality, or no, sorry, blurs sonority. And you can also blur tonality as well. But like I felt a lot of it was the idea of blurring the sonority of something. What is major? What is minor? And if you just kind of blur it, which chromaticism, lo and behold, you have something that's like, am I happy? Am I sad? Are we laughing? Am I crying? Am I uncomfortable? Am I uneasy? And so a lot of it just kind of lives in this tension where you're not, you know, it's a lot more like a lean into like the nervous laugh, you know, and that was kind of where the comedy lies. And then I think the comedy itself, I think it was a lot of it in timing, where you cut out, where you come back in. And just kind of making these, you know, keeping the music going at a motor pace where eventually you don't really know that it's there until you make a big hit with like a, you know, a piano and a harp and a bit like a loud bang or some sort of percussion. And also, I mean, as we all know, when we're working with actors, especially a comedic actor like Kaylee Cuoco, who it's all in her face, it's all in her eyes.
Yeah, it's huge. It's great.
Yeah, and I'm
impressive.
Yes, she's so expressive, and I'm such a maximalist when I write. Like, I mean, I have to practice a lot of restraint in my writing, especially in a situation like this where it's like everything, like, you know, more is more kind of thing.
Yeah.
You know, even though we work in an art form where oftentimes less is more, but in this case, it was like more is more. And there were times where I would just kind of step all over her eyes. Like I would just step all over her facial expressions. And there were, I think a lot of, you know, in the first season moving to the second season, I really had to kind of learn that there are times to do that. And then there were times to really pull back on that and just let her eyes do, and then let the quick talking of everything do the work. And then you have the flip side is the horror. And Jess, I'm with you. I'm like, I am so hooked on horror. I can't watch horror. Like I'm definitely like a, you know, kind of
Me too.
but once you know where all the bodies are buried, literally, you know, I'm like, oh, this is so cool, because there's that genre, like it requires all the facets of what we do as composers, and it's kind of like this undiscovered, or, you know, territory, undiscovered country, where it's like it's just not obvious, it's not so overt about what horror is, because it can play into the entire emotional landscape of what we have as human beings. And so anyway, all that was just really, really fun to explore, and just a big and just a big opportunity and invitation to experiment with, some of the things that we know to be funny and horror.
I love that. That's great. Oh, I love it so much. So I want to get into how we are making these scores and delivering these scores. Raphaelle, I know you spoke about your orchestral process, like getting to have it be a massive ensemble. What was your notes process like? Were you delivering fully realized, beautiful mock-ups and saying, here we go, now we're ready to go? Is that pretty much how you had to work? Use that trailer music, massive, beautiful synthestration, orchestration, and check the boxes down the line? How did that go for you?
Sorry, that's such a good question. I don't know if it's a good or a bad thing, but I hate bad mock-ups. Like I'm just always going to make it sound as authentic and genuine as possible, almost every time, as in I'm not going to be able to record live for everything. I think it's a good thing. I think it's a bad thing also because it's time consuming, and it means that I have to be so perfectionist with every single thing when sometimes it doesn't really matter. And even the filmmakers are not even going to see or hear the difference, if you see what I mean. So, and I think I get that from my first big gig, which was Secret of the Whales. It was produced by James Cameron. It was back in 2021, and it was at the beginning of COVID. So we started kind of knowing quickly that it wouldn't be possible for us to record. And it was at the very beginning of COVID, right? So we didn't even know how we would figure out smaller ensembles or different ways to record remotely. And I had to deliver fast. So we couldn't record anything. So I had to do this big orchestral score in the box. And I think this is where I learned how to master the mock-up, because it had to sound great. And it has to sound as authentic as possible. But for this one, it was very different because I knew from the beginning that I would have access to a studio in London, that it would be a 60 to 70 piece orchestra. I knew what orchestrator I was going to work with, and the writing has been very different from the get-go because of that. I was like, I know I'm going to be able to record, and sometimes I make decisions based on what I can achieve in the box versus what I could achieve if it was recorded live, down the line. And so I realized that it massively changed the way to work for me, the score. Because sometimes I would pick a melody or even change a whole instrumentation just because I knew it would not be recorded. So it had to be perfect as it was. And you cannot always achieve, like almost never achieve perfect only with plugins. So in this case, I had to kind of free myself from all that and go crazy and go bananas. Be like, this sounds like shit as it is, but it's gonna sound great ultimately. And also try to just trust yourself and trust the process and trust your producers that they're gonna hear what I hear, and it's all gonna be fine.
Yeah.
So, but that one was great in that regard. Yeah.
Awesome. Now, Jess, on your project, you had
turning you around. Hold on, because this iPad was like, I'm gonna die. See you later. Hold on. It's like it. Okay, we're safe.
We're safe. Oh, amazing. So, Jess, on yours, I loved your use of your cello recording. There's this incredible solo cello with these insane crunchy double stops and awesome arpeggiated stuff, and it's just like some of those double stops was like, I wouldn't want to play those, but it's so gorgeous and it's so effective in the context of because we're coming to this, everything's in reality, the horror is here, we're in it. And I wonder, were you having conversations with your player, or was it all on the page? And or was that like the way, it's just such a raw performance. It's I loved it. What's your process like when you're working with musicians?
Well, that process was very unconventional because I called my buddy in. I should have called you, but I wouldn't have put you through this. I called someone in last minute and I went, okay, you hear that temp? Here's the key. This is what we're doing. And we just like experimented like lunatics, and I made it difficult for him. It was Dom Lewis, which is hilarious. So he was like, he's not busy enough. And I was like, hey, can you bring your cello? And I asked him to do it because he fancies himself like an ex-cellist. He doesn't really play much anymore. So I wanted somebody that felt like they were out of practice to come in and kind of make it feel like that, whether it was intentional or not, just because he hadn't been practicing in a minute. So yeah, he came in here and I set one mic up and we just kind of, we went after it together. There were no notes. I kind of just directed him, hey, can you change here, now do double. It was all in real time.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And so, because, I had listened to the temp, I genuinely thought I thought it was very cool, but I was unsure if the showrunner actually liked it or not. And I could never get her because she was working on all of these other episodes. So I did a more, I don't want to say conventional, but the first take of what I had written was more kind of in line with what the rest of the score does.
Yeah.
And then she heard it and she was like, oh, well, she's like, great. I know you can write music, Jessica. And I was like, yeah. And she's like, cool. Now I want you to go do something raw and ugly and just go outside of the box. And so that's what ended up happening and coming to fruition, is that piece, which was really cool to do.
I love that. I love hearing about how that can shake out for folks. Like, you do what you think they want from the temp, and then the temp informs in a different way where it's like, no, I absolutely hate the temp. Don't lean in, or vice versa, or like go harder, or what does that look like? And I think that's so great. I know we've got this has been so fun. We have not, I feel like I could keep just asking these very big questions. I'm going to ask very quickly about, because I want to do like a speed round also, but I would love to talk just briefly about, like, Sherri, what does your delivery process look like? When you're working on a project, when you're getting things approved, I feel like we talked a bit about this, that it seems like you know what you're doing at this point. And you're in this project in particular, you're able to sort of deliver, and ta-da, you're landing it pretty well. And I love your confidence with that too, because I'm always like, here's 17 versions. Maybe not that bad.
I'm glad I have you fooled.
But I love just like lazing with like, here's what this needs to be. And I think that's so great. So
yes, I always have the answer. It's perfect every time. Version ones. I'm a lot like Raphaelle, actually, where it's like I honestly, maybe a lot of us too, where it's like I also come from a lot of the start of my career has been in episodic, and the kind of episodic where it's like, not only like, even if you have the budget to record, you don't have the time. And a lot of that my experience comes from even network television, which I know that's kind of on its way out, but the kind of thing where it's like, you mix it, you deliver it, it's on air a week later. So even if there was time, you're doing it probably like you're bringing someone over, or like you're having, like that, like you're right there doing it. So a lot of like all of my mock-ups and all of my demos are like Raphaelle was saying, it's like they're going to the stage. If I can't get them recorded, or you spend some time doing a library beforehand, and then like recording things live, and then sort of making your instruments, and then building your score from that. But I mean, just in terms of like logistically, in case anybody wanted, like, it's I'm print, especially because the speed of it, I'm printing when I print a mix for review, I'm printing stems as well, because if there's a note and I can possibly handle it and just edit a stem, I'll do it that way, or that kind of thing. So, and then delivering a Pro Tools session either through a music editor or directly to the dub, and it's just kind of goes from there. And if there is recording, a lot of it is replacing that stem, replacing those couple of stems. I try to keep anything that's pre-recorded or already done. That's Unity. That's Unity. And then anything else that's live is getting mixed to that. So it's not as taxing for time, for speed, and sometimes even for budget. It's not as taxing on the score mixer, so that they're not having to mix the entire thing, you know. So I mean, as we know, it's like delivering, like organization is key.
A question with that. So I know our machines are getting faster, beefier, etc. Are you running two machines and printing on a separate machine, or are you doing it all in one box?
Yeah, I used to have three because that's what we had to do before, you know, when we had to wind the computers up. And so, so like samples were all on this one, and then this was my Pro Tools rig, and this is my sequencer rig. And now, technically, yes, I could do it all in one. We could probably do it all in one, but I still have two. So sequencer and everything lives there, and then I'm printing to a separate rig. So that rig can be much smaller, much less powerful,
Yeah.
easy traveling. Should I ever do that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
amazing. Okay, I want to ask so many more questions that are like in depth and big, but I'm gonna do fast round stuff. So I'm gonna start. Okay, I'm gonna start here. I want to ask about with tight deadlines, how do you and sometimes intense subject matter, what would be some a tip you'd give for folks regarding mental health? I don't feel like we talk about it enough.
I think
So
I need a whole session on that.
Me
Me
too.
too.
After what I have to do, what I have to
I
watch
know, so speed
over and
round.
over again.
It's not fair. Yeah.
Oh, if you can take any breaks, it's sometimes you can't. Sometimes you literally can't take a break for 2 weeks, and I understand, or 2 months. But even like 10 minutes sometimes, anything to be restorative because it can really weigh on you and take away that groundedness you need to survive.
Amazing.
Therapy. I
Well, yeah.
Therapy. Yeah. I mean, my husband and I work together. And so but we have a great therapist and we have great tools. And, I know not everyone has access to that, but that's something that, like, as a group, I would love for us to advocate so that composers can have access to that. And that seems like such a crazy thing to figure out, but can we? We should.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm with you on that.
Yeah.
Great. Raphaelle?
Delegate. Or go ahead. Go ahead, Raphaelle.
Yeah.
Oh no. I I was gonna have kids because that's how you know and learn how to manage time. No, that's great. No, I'm sorry. That's a joke. But it really it it taught me how to really just see time as a very highly precious, valuable thing because you have very little time for yourself when you work and have kids. Um, my tips to be able to, do it all is to I force myself to have a 9 to 6 kind of situation, whereas if I can't squeeze what I have to do within this time period, there's a problem. And do I take too much or do I take too little and I spend too much time on achieving something? And it really works great for me because I have a breather every day. And every time I go to work in the morning, I really feel like, I had this break in the evening. And so I really try to force myself. I don't go to the studio during the weekend, for example. I force myself not to do that. It's hard sometimes, but just trying to squeeze more in less time rather than having to eat up the time that I take for myself and my family. Yeah.
I love that. I feel like so many people, especially younger composers, they might just live in a place of fear and not feel like they could have a family or it's cool to hear you say
yeah.
that. I think it's really valuable
Totally.
to hear that sort of aspect of like, you figure it out. I know that just as a composer with my own timelines, it's like the more concentrated I am with my work, I realize how much time I'm wasting when I'm writing for 12 hours straight, and the focus isn't there and the fatigue. So I think that's really special to hear you say that, and I think could be important to a lot of composers.
I have a totally opposite approach also as a mother. And it came about during the pandemic where I was working I didn't have a choice. I was working about 16 hours a day.
Oh,
And I just never saw my son. And we had to do some work in my studio. And so I brought a rig upstairs into my house that I have like a little studio under the house. brought it up on a wheeled desk, and it has been the best thing ever because I could multitask, getting, making sure he had his meals and whatever, and sometimes even in the same room with him while I was working and he was doing homework or playing video games or something. And it kind of allowed, it didn't give me any structure for mental health, but it allowed me all of this time to be around him and tend to him and then just get my work done around the clock,
That's
which
amazing.
I didn't have a choice. But now I actually enjoy that. And that's primarily how I work because it's just kind of easier now. But I should probably go back down to the studio, make it a little more structured. But there's all kinds of ways you can do anything. We can all do anything.
Jess, you
Yeah.
mentioned delegate. I heard you say that one.
Yeah, it took me a long time to figure out how
Oh yeah.
important that is. And certainly after I had my son, and he's nearly 3, I just had to learn how to build a team. And currently my team is just myself and one other person who I put a lot of faith and trust in. And I really couldn't do anything without him at this point. So I feel so grateful to have him. But again, it was about removing ego in a way, and putting some trust into somebody else and knowing like the job will get done. Of course I'm going to oversee everything and make sure that the person I'm working with feels seen and safe, and I feel like the work is as it should be. But that has been a game changer for me. And I encourage anyone and everyone who's working on anything to not be afraid of that, to try to move past that barrier, because it really can change your entire life and workflow. And also it gives someone else an opportunity to learn and grow from, what you're doing. So that has been a really important part of my process for sure.
It's such a hard transition, I found. It's
Yeah.
so hard.
I
It's
still haven't
so
done it.
hard.
Yeah.
And once you're done it, you're like, oh,
Why didn't I do that earlier?
yeah.
And like just a button on this too. It's like there's been many composers out there who have asked me, hey, or have said to me, I'd like to have a child, but I don't think I can because of this job. And that that was just so devastating to hear. So I'm always encouraging people to have a life outside of this life, because I know it's a lot of us feel like, okay, this isn't what we do, it's who we are. But it's also important to have a fruitful life outside of this. At the end of the day, it is a job. We're doing a task and we are getting paid to do it. So I just think work-life balance is so important. So yeah.
Sherri, what are some other keys you have about how do you manage? Because you are running hard.
Well, listen, I applaud every woman and man like who have children and are working, because I don't have children, and I am struggling to find like that work life balance. So I think it's a like, you're kind of all my heroes. I mean, everybody here, whether you have children or not, but like everyone here is my heroes, because I think that's really amazing, and it's something that I don't know how I would handle it. But I've been trying lately I've been trying meditation, which I say that as in like it's novel for me because I have a really difficult time concentrating. But I'm now happy to report that I can actually keep my eyes closed for 10 minutes. Like
Big.
I mean, and literally it's the most amazing thing. But Jamie, to your point, like you're right, not everybody has access to therapy, and it's sometimes hard to find like a good therapist and something that's really going to work for you. But Insight Timer is kind of cool. I've been and Calm app is also really good. I actually gifted a year of the Calm app to one of my assistants. Like it was kind of a great gift. It's like, hey, like if you're having, it's just and these have free versions too, so you don't necessarily have to pay for anything, but and it just I don't know, I find that's really nice. And there's so much out there just to kind of, it sounds silly, but man, gratitude is like it's one of the hardest things for me to remember to lead with. My neuro pathway is so geared towards the comparison, whether it's upwards or downwards comparison. Like if you just like have that gratitude of, wow, I get to try again today. I think that's like, for me, it's helping.
Y'all, this is good. I feel like I could go and like take on the world. This is incredible. I feel like we have actually reached our 1 hour mark. If we were to, I have one. Do you want to do one last little mini second question? One last ittle bitty one. Okay. What's one big, I feel like every project I do, I have some crazy takeaway, like something that I like learned from this project that made me go like, oh, why didn't I just trust my instincts on this thing? Why da 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 da? But if you were to have a takeaway from this specific project or something that you've taken away recently, what would that be for you? Can you do like a little quick zip of like a recent takeaway? Is that
Stay
something? Does
out
that
of
feel
your
great?
own way. That's what I always say is stay out of your own way. Just you've got it. Just don't just let it happen. It's okay to make mistakes.
Amazing. Any other ones?
Go big or go home, you know? Like, I mean, they're not, it's so much easier to take something out than it is to put something in. So it's like if it was too much, just layer it out. Just go, they're not expecting it. Go big or go home.
Love it. That's great.
Trust your gut. It's all right
I was about
here
to say
in
that.
front of you. Just, it's all here.
Yeah, I'll go with the same as Jamie. I've been told so many times when I was at the studio recording at Abbey Road Studio, I was like, am I what am I supposed to do now? And people will be like, Raph, you're the boss, so you tell us, what we do. And just like not being able to let go and being like, you own this, you're the boss. It's so hard in our field because everything is so subjective. So be your own boss and yeah, own it.
Yes. Do you have
Yeah.
any last thoughts?
Oh, I mean, I was like so inspired. I was like, yeah, guys.
Yes.
But just same, like big fat swings. Like that was the takeaway. It's just like go all the way, no holding back, basically. And that's yeah. All right,
Love it. I am so thankful to have a chance to chat with each and every one of you. I'm going to say once again the names of the projects and everyone's names just as a little wonderful congratulations to all of you. Sherri Chung, based on a true story. Jamie Jackson from Bad Monkey. Raphaelle Thibaut from Sea Lions of the Galapagos. Anna Waronker from Yellowjackets. Jessica Rose Weiss from American Horror Stories, The Thing Under the Bed. This has been so wonderful to connect with you. I feel restored and I'm just so thankful to have this time with you. And I hope we get to chat again soon on all of these things at length and more. And congratulations to every one of you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having
Thank you
us.
so
Thank
much.
you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Amazing.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.